I want you to start by picturing a high-stakes scenario. Imagine you're a gambler.
Okay.
But you're not at a casino in Vegas or Monte Carlo. You are a wealthy industrialist in the late 19th century. The year is 1898.
So we're going way back. Horse-drawn carriages, steam engines.
Telegrams, exactly.
Yeah.
And you want to place a massive bet, a bet that you genuinely believe will secure the future of your country.
Right.
But here's the catch. Your country is currently a colony. It doesn't have its own government. It doesn't have its own army.
It's entirely ruled by a foreign empire.
Completely. So the board is rigged against you before you even sit down.
Yes, stacked against you from day one.
So where do you put your money? The safe bets at the time are incredibly obvious. You put it in steel, you put it in textiles, you put it in cotton.
Because that's where the immediate profit is. That is what the British Empire wants.
Exactly. Right.
Sure, I mean, that was the economic engine of the colonial era. You extract raw materials, ship them out to the UK, and buy back finished goods. If you wanted to get rich, you played that game.
You played the game. But our protagonist today, Jamsetji Tata, he doesn't bet on steel. He doesn't bet on cotton.
No, he does not.
He looks at the board, ignores the easy money, and pushes all his chips onto something completely abstract, something that honestly didn't even have a market in India at the time.
He bets on science.
He bets on science.
It's a move that makes zero sense on a quarterly earnings report.
Not at all.
But it makes perfect sense if you're thinking in century.
And that is exactly what we are unpacking in today's deep dive. We are exploring the story of the Indian Institute of Science, or IISc.
Which is such a fascinating topic.
It really is. But looking at the sources you've pulled together for us, this isn't really a story about just building a university, is it?
No, not at all. If you really dig into the source material, this is a story about nation building.
Yeah.
But nation building before the nation even existed.
Which is wild to think about.
It's what I like to call a case study in strategic imagination.
Strategic imagination. I really like that term. What does that actually mean in this context?
Well, it's the ability to see a critical need, like a deep scientific research base, decades before anyone else realizes it's missing.
Okay.
It's about building the engine before you've even designed the car. It's recognizing that true power isn't just about money, it's about knowledge.
So let's get into the context here. Late 1800s India, we often have this romanticized view of the British Raj, or conversely, we only think of the extreme poverty.
Right.
But what was the actual intellectual landscape like for someone living there?
It was constrained, is probably the polite word for it.
Constrained.
Yeah. The British had established universities in Calcutta, Bombay, and Madras. They existed. But here is the key insight from the historical notes. These were purely teaching and examining bodies.
Meaning they weren't creating new knowledge, they weren't laboratories?
Precisely. Their job was to churn out clerks, administrators, maybe a few lawyers to help run the colonial bureaucracy.
So an assembly line for functionaries.
Exactly. The curriculum was fixed. You memorized the book, you passed the exam, you got a desk job.
You go there, learn what's in the textbook, and perpetuate the system.
Yeah.
You are definitely not encouraged to question why the textbook is written that way in the first place.
Right. There was almost zero focus on research, and industrial science was essentially non-existent.
Wow.
And the prevailing attitude, and this is crucial to understanding the resistance Tata faced, was that science was a Western commodity.
A commodity, like tea or spices.
In a way, yes. If you needed a bridge designed, you hired a British engineer. If you needed a chemical formula for a factory, you imported the expertise from Europe.
Because the idea was that India was a place for labor and raw materials, not for intellectual property.
Spot on. And that brings us to Jamsetji Tata.
Now, most people know the name Tata. The Tata Group is a massive global conglomerate today.
Huge.
But in 1898, he's already successful. He has the textile mills. He has the money.
Right.
Why does he care about science? Why not just build 10 more mills and become the richest man in the empire?
Because he understood the fundamental difference between being rich and being sovereign.
Okay, let's unpack that. What is the difference?
Tata realized that factories alone are fragile.
Fragile how?
Well, you can build a mill. But if the machine inside breaks and you have to wait 6 months for an engineer from Manchester to sail over and fix it, you are in control.
You're dependent.
You are. You are just a user of technology, not a master of it.
That's a really vulnerable position to be in.
It is. The sources quote a sentiment of his that I find incredibly powerful. He essentially asked a question that drove his entire philosophy.
Which it was.
How can a nation rise without its own research?
Oh, wow. That feels like a very dangerous question to ask in a colony.
It was an incredibly dangerous question because asking for a research institute wasn't just asking for a school, it was implicitly asking for independence of thought.
It's declaring that you don't need the empire to explain the world to you.
Exactly. It's saying we are capable of mastering the forces of nature ourselves. It challenges the whole paternalistic narrative of the empire that the locals need the British to run things.
Spot on.
And Tata was convinced that without this scientific capacity, the ability to create, not just copy any political freedom, would be completely superficial.
Right, because you'd get your flag and your anthem, but you'd still be economically enslaved.
Because you didn't own the knowledge.
Now, there is a cinematic moment in this timeline that I absolutely love. It involves a ship.
Yes, the SS Empress of India.
Right, crossing the Pacific in 1893.
This is one of those historical intersections that feels scripted, like something out of a movie.
Seriously.
Jamsetji Tata is traveling from Japan to Chicago to visit the World's Fair. And on that exact same boat is Swami Vivekananda.
The famous monk who introduced Hindu philosophy to the West.
The very same. So you have the titan of industry and the titan of spirituality stuck on a boat together for days in the middle of the ocean.
Do we know what they talked about? Because I assume they didn't just make small talk about the weather.
We actually have a very good idea based on later letters and accounts.
Okay.
You might assume they only talked about religion, but the core of their conversation was about the future of India.
Interesting.
Vivekananda was incredibly pragmatic. He didn't just want spiritual awakening. He wanted a scientific awakening.
That's a fascinating blend. Usually we see science and religion framed as opposing forces, especially back in that era.
Not in this case. Vivekananda urged Tata to channel his massive resources into the sciences.
Why science specifically for a monk?
His argument was that spirituality provides the moral compass and the inner strength, but science provides the actual means to uplift the masses from poverty.
You can't meditate on an empty stomach.
Exactly. And you can't feed a nation without agricultural science and industry.
So in a way, the monk told the businessman that the holiest thing he could possibly do was build a laboratory.
That conversation seems to be the main catalyst. It was the final push. Tata got off that boat with absolute clarity.
He didn't want just another college.
No. He wanted to build a scientific powerhouse, a place strictly dedicated to original advanced research.
And he actually put his money where his mouth was. This wasn't just hypothetical talk on a cruise.
A staggering amount of money. In 1898, he pledged properties in Bombay worth 3 million rupees at the time to create an endowment.
Which was what, like half his net worth?
Effectively half his personal fortune, yes.
Okay, so let's look at the checklist here.
Yeah.
He has the vision, he has the money, half his fortune, and he has the moral backing of a prominent spiritual leader.
Right.
Logic would suggest the British administration would say, great, let's get this started. Free education.
Logic rarely applies to colonial bureaucracy,
Fair point.
especially when it threatens the status quo. This brings us to the resistance phase of the story. The British administration didn't just hesitate. They actively stonewalled him.
What was their argument, though? How do you say no to that kind of massive donation?
Skepticism and paternalism mainly. Lord Curzon, the viceroy at the time, was particularly doubtful.
What were they saying in the archives?
The notes show them asking questions like, is India really ready for this level of science? Will there even be any students capable of doing this kind of research?
Wow.
Or is this just a vanity project?
They basically didn't believe Indians could do high-level physics or chemistry.
Essentially, yes. They tried to water the whole thing down. They suggested maybe just a trade school or a polytechnic to train better mechanics.
But Tata refused to compromise.
He said absolutely not. He wanted world-class research or nothing. He wanted a place that could genuinely rival Cambridge or Oxford.
The stubbornness of a true visionary. But this delay had a serious cost, didn't it?
A very tragic cost. The negotiations dragged on for years. Jamsetji Tata died in 1904.
Oh, man.
And the institute was still just a pile of paperwork and endless arguments. He never saw a single brick laid.
That is heartbreaking. It's the classic tragedy of the architect. You draw the plans, you fight the battles, but you don't always get to live in the house.
Very true. But this is where the story proves the resilience of the idea itself. The vision was robust enough to survive the visionary.
It needed new champions to carry across the finish line.
Enter the Mysore royal family. This is a great twist in the plot.
Yes, specifically Krishnaraja Wadiyar IV, the Maharaja of Mysore.
He was a very progressive ruler. He saw exactly what Tata was trying to do, and he realized the British weren't going to make it easy.
So what did he do?
Well, while the administration was dragging their feet on the bureaucratic details, the Maharaja stepped in and provided the one thing money couldn't buy in the city: land.
And not just a small plot either.
No. He granted 371 acres in Bengaluru.
It's massive.
That land grant broke the deadlock. It gave the institute a physical home. And finally, in 1909, the Indian Institute of Science was officially born.
1909. I really want to pause on that date. That is almost 40 years before India becomes independent in 1947.
That is the critical takeaway of this entire deep dive.
Because most nations follow a standard sequence, right? First, you get independence. Second, you set up a government. Third, you build your institutions and labs.
Exactly. Here, the timeline is completely flipped.
The lab was waiting for the nation.
Flipped entirely. The foundation was poured before the house was even designed.
So let's fast forward those 40 years. It's 1947. The Union Jack comes down. The tricolor goes up. India is free.
Yes.
But looking at the economic data from that specific time, the situation was incredibly grim.
Grim is putting it mildly. The country had just been partitioned, which was a massive trauma. The economy had been drained by supporting the Allied forces in World War II.
Right.
Infrastructure was minimal. Literacy was extremely low. And technically, India was dependent on imports for almost everything, from sewing needles to locomotives.
And you have the first Prime Minister, Jawaharlal Nehru, saying science is the way forward. He famously called factories and dams the temples of modern India.
He did. But here's the major problem. You can want to build a dam. You can want to build a fighter jet.
Sure.
But you cannot just wish the engineers into existence. It takes 20 years to train a senior scientist. You can't microwave that process.
Unless you already started 40 years ago.
Exactly. This is the massive payoff of Tata's bet. This is where the strategic imagination really pays dividends.
So when the new Indian government looked around and asked who knows how to do aerospace,
IISc was there.
who understands metallurgy for our defense,
IISc was there.
it wasn't a startup trying to figure things out on the fly. It was a mature institution with 4 decades of hard experience.
It was a deep reservoir of talent. You can trace the lineage of almost every major Indian scientific achievement back to IISc.
Can we get specific here? The sources mention ISRO, the space agency. India has a massive space program now.
Oh, the space program is the best example. Vikram Sarabhai, who is considered the father of the Indian space program, had deep ties to ISC.
Okay.
Satish Dhawan, another absolute legend of ISRO, was the director of ISC. The wind tunnels they used to test India's very first rockets, they were at ISC.
So without that foundation back in 1909, the space program of the 1960s implies what?
It likely wouldn't have happened, or it would have been delayed by decades. You just can't buy that kind of institutional knowledge off a shelf.
It has to be cultivated over time.
Exactly. ISC was the nursery for the entire scientific ecosystem. DRDO for defense, the atomic energy program. They all drew water from that exact same well.
It's like a savings account that compounded interest for 40 years. And they can recash it out when they needed it most.
That is a perfect analogy, an intellectual savings account.
So that explains the mid-20th century, but I want to bring this to the present day. We started the deep dive talking about the Silicon Valley of the East. Right. If you work in tech anywhere in the world, Bengaluru,
Yeah.
it's a massive global hub for IT, for biotech, for startups.
Absolutely.
The question is, why Bengaluru? Why not Mumbai or Delhi or Calcutta?
It's definitely not an accident. And it's not just the pleasant weather, though, that obviously helps. It traces directly back to that land grant in 1909.
The mere presence of the institute created the city's identity.
It created the entire ecosystem. Think about the cluster effect. You put a world-class research center in a city. That attracts really smart professors.
And they attract smart students.
And then the government sets up its defense labs nearby simply to be close to the professors.
Right. So now you have defense labs like DRDO and space agencies like ISRO headquartered there because the brainpower is already there.
Exactly. Then in the 80s and 90s, when the IT boom happens, where do all the multinational companies go?
They go where the talent is.
They go to Bengaluru.
So Texas Instruments, Wipro, Infosys, they all set up shop in the gravity field of ISC.
Correct. And today it's not just IT. The sources highlight that ISE is leading in deep tech now.
Like what kind of deep tech?
We're talking nanotechnology, brain computing, advanced biotechnology, sustainable energy systems.
It's moved from heavy industry all the way to the digital and biological frontier.
And because you have the sheer density of researchers, you now have a massive startup culture. Deep science startups are spinning out of IS labs today, just like Stanford spins them out in California.
So it wasn't just a historical relic that helped out in 1947. It remained totally relevant.
It's consistently ranking as India's top research institution.
It is wild to think that a conversation on a boat in 1893 is the reason a coder is launching an AI startup in Bengaluru in 2026.
It shows the long arc of institution building. It's the butterfly effect, but engineered.
I want to pivot back to the human why of this story.
Yeah.
We touched on strategic imagination, but I want to push a bit deeper.
Sure.
There's a deeper philosophical argument here about the actual nature of power.
Yes. It's the stark distinction between economic power and scientific capacity.
Most people would probably say they're the exact same thing. Rich countries have good science.
Usually, yes, they correlate. But the source matters. Tata understood that economic power based purely on trading or manufacturing someone else's invention is incredibly fragile.
Because it can be taken away.
Exactly. If you are just the factory floor for the world, you can easily be replaced by a cheaper factory floor.
We see that happening in global supply chains all the time right now.
Yeah.
The factory moves to wherever the labor is cheapest.
All the time. But scientific capacity, the actual ability to invent the steel-making process or the ability to design the algorithm, that is sovereignty.
That cannot be easily copied or outsourced.
No, I can't.
So true independence isn't just having your own flag and anthem. It's having your own brain trust.
Precisely. If you are always relying on other nations for your critical technology, you are just a client state.
And Tata didn't want India to be a client.
He wanted it to be an architect. He wanted the nation to own the blueprints, not just the bricks.
It really challenges the way we think about philanthropy today, too.
It really does. We live in a world obsessed with quarterly results. Even in modern philanthropy, people demand measurable impact in 12 months.
Right. Show me the spreadsheet. How many lives did we save this year?
And that is important, don't get me wrong, but the return on investment for IS took 50 years to fully materialize.
Imagine pitching that to a board of directors today.
Yeah.
Hey, give me half your fortune. The payout is in 1960, and you will definitely be dead by then.
You'd be laughed out of the room immediately.
Completely.
But that is what makes this specific story so unique. It was the ultimate long game. Tata wasn't solving a problem for the India of 1898.
He was solving a problem for a free India that he knew he would personally never see.
That is the true definition of a legacy, planting trees under whose shade you never expect to sit.
And look at the unlikely collaboration that actually made it happen. You had a Parsi businessman, a Hindu monk, and a royal king.
Commerce, spirituality, and royalty.
3 completely distinct pillars of society coming together to build a temple. But a temple of science.
It's a very unique origin story. You just don't see that kind of cross-disciplinary unity very often in history.
And it actually worked. When the moment of destiny finally arrived in 1947, the tools were sitting there ready to be used.
The tools were ready. You don't build the fire station when the house is already on fire.
No, you build it years before, when everything is calm.
ISV was India's preparation for a future they could only hope would one day arrive.
So for everyone listening right now, whether you're building a company, managing a team, or just planning your own career, what is the one core thing we should take away from the story of IISc?
I think it's the courage to invest in the abstract. It's so easy to just solve the immediate crisis in front of you.
It's comfortable.
It is. It is very hard to invest in foundational knowledge or long-term capabilities that might not pay off for a whole generation. But as this story clearly shows, those are the exact investments that define nations.
It makes you wonder what the IS of today is. What are we building right now that won't actually pay off until 2075?
That is the big question, and if we can't answer it, we might be in real trouble.
We have traveled from a boat in the Pacific to the boardrooms of the British Raj, through the chaos of partition, all the way to the AI labs of modern Bengaluru.
It is quite a journey for one deep dive.
It really is. And it serves as a powerful reminder that the world we live in is shaped by the dreams of people who are long gone.
That is a beautiful thought to end on.
But before we go, I want to leave you, the listener, with one final provocation. We're so used to looking for revolutions in loud political speeches or on violent battlefields, we look for the loud, obvious moments.
But this story suggests we might be looking in the wrong place entirely.
Exactly. The most powerful revolutions often don't begin with a bang. They begin in a quiet room or on a ship or in a laboratory built decades before the country it serves is even free.
That is definitely something to mull over.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the architect of innovation. We will see you next time.